ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वं रूपः कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांशः श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगणरघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सहगणललिता श्रीविशाखावितांश्च हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधु जगतपते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धु एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। नमो महावदन्नाय कृष्णप्रेमप्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्णचैतन्यनामकृत्विषे नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। नमः ओं विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे जगद्गुरु श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय।
Jai. Thank you, Prabhu. Okay, Haribol. So today we continue Bhagavad Gita chapter 3, I think. Yes, chapter 3, text number 36. Arjuna vacha atha kena prayukto yam papam charati purushaha anichan api varshneya palad iva niyojitaha. Arjuna vacha, Arjuna said, atha thereafter, hereafter, kena by what? Prayuktaha, impelled, ayam one, papam sins, charati acts, purusaha a man, anichan without desiring, api although, Varshneya, O descendant of Vrishni, Balad by force, Iva as if, Niyojitaha engaged. Translation. Arjuna said, O descendant of Vrishni, by what is one impelled to sinful acts, even unwillingly, as if engaged by force? Purport. A living entity as a part and parcel of the Supreme is originally spiritual, pure, and free from all material contaminations. Therefore, by nature he is not subjected to the sins of the material world, but when he is in contact with the material nature, he acts in many sinful ways without hesitation, and sometimes even against his will. As such, Arjuna's question to Krishna is very sanguine as to, as to the perverted nature of the living entities. Although the living entity sometimes does not want to act in sin, he is still forced to act. Sinful actions are not, however, impelled by the supersoul within, but are due to another cause, as the Lord explains in the next verse. Hare Krishna. Who wants to read the next verse?
Prabhu, I can, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, yes, Prabhu.
Shri Bhagavan Vacha Kama Esha Krodha Esha Rajaguna Samudbhava Mahashano Mahapapma Vidyena Vairinam. Shri Bhagavan Vacha. The personality of God had said, Kamaha, lust, Eshaha, all these, Krodhaha, wrath, Eshaha, all these, Rajaguna, the mode of passion, Samodbhavaha, born of Mahashanaha, all devouring, Mahapapma, greatly sinful, with the no, Enam, this, Iha, in the material world, Vairinam, greatest enemy. Translation. The Blessed Lord said, it is lust only, Arjuna, which is born of contact with the material modes of passion and later transformed into wrath, and which is all devouring sinful enemy of this world. Purport. When a living entity comes in contact with the material creation, his eternal love for Krishna is transformed into lust in association with the modes of passion. Or in other words, the sense of love of God becomes transformed into lust as milk in contact with salt, tamarind is transformed into yogurt. Then again, when lust is unsatisfied, it turns into wrath. Wrath is transformed into illusion. Illusion continues the material existence. Therefore, lust is the greatest enemy of the living entity. This lust only which induces the pure living entity to remain entangled in the material world. Wrath is the manifestation of the mode of ignorance. These modes exhibit themselves as wrath and other corollaries. If therefore the modes of passion, instead of being degraded into the modes of ignorance, are elevated into the mode of goodness by the prescribed method of living and acting, then one can be saved from the degradation of wrath by spiritual attachment. The Supreme Personality of Godhead expanded himself into many for his ever increasing spiritual bliss, and the living entities and are parts and parcels of this spiritual bliss. They also have partial independence, but by misuse of their independence in the service attitude is transformed into the propensity for sense enjoyment. They come under the sway of lust. This material creation is created by the Lord to give a facility to conditions to fulfill their lustful propensities, and when they are completely baffled by prolonged lustful activities, the living entities begin to inquire about their real position. This inquiry is the beginning of the Vedanta Sutras, wherein it is said, Atato Brahma Jignasa. One should inquire into the Supreme, and in Supreme is defined in Srimad Bhagavatam as Janmadhyasya Yato Anvayad Itarascha, or the origin of everything is the Supreme Brahman. Therefore, the origin of lust is also in the Supreme. If therefore lust is transformed into love for the Supreme, or transformed into Krishna consciousness, or in other words, desiring everything for Krishna, then both lust and wrath can be spiritualized. Hanuman, the great servitor of Lord Rama, engaged his wrath upon his enemies for the satisfaction of the Lord. Therefore, lust and wrath, when they are employed in Krishna consciousness, become our friends instead of our enemies.
धूमेना धूमेनात्रियते धूमेना व्रियते वानिर् यथादर्शो मूलेन च यथो यथोल्बणे वरतो गर्भस्तथा तनेदम् अव्रतम् धूमेन by smoke avriyata covered vaniha fire yataha just as adarshaha mirror malena by dust cha also yataha just as albaina by the womb avrataha is covered garbhaha embryo tataha so tenaha by that lust idam this avrat this avratam is covered. Translation: as fire is covered by smoke, as a mirror is covered by dust, or as the embryo is covered by the womb, similarly the living entity is covered by different degrees of this lust. But there are three degrees of covering of the living entities by which is his pure consciousness is obscured. Obscured. This covering is but lust under different manifestation like smoke in the air, dust on the mirror, and the worm above their embryo. When lust is compared to smoke, it is understood that the fire of the living spark can be a little perceived. In other words, when the living entities exhibit his Krishna consciousness slightly, he may be like likened to the fire covered by smoke, although fire is necessary where there is a smoke. There is no overt manifestation of fire in the early stage. This stage is like the beginning of Krishna consciousness. The dust on the mirror refer to a cleansing process of their mirror of the mind by so many spiritual methods. The best process is to chant the holy name of the Lord. The embryo covered by the worm is an analogy illustrating a helpless position. For the child in the womb is so helpless that he cannot even move. This stage of living condition can be compared to that of tree. The trees are also living entities, but they have been put in such a condition of life, such a great exhibition of lust, that they are most void of all consciousness. The covered mirror is compared to the birds, beasts, and the smoke covered fire is compared to the human beings. In the form of being, the living entity may revive a little Krishna consciousness, and if he makes further development, the fire of spiritual life can be kindled in the human form of life by careful handling of the smoke in the fire. The fire can be made of blaze. Therefore, the human form of life is a chance for the living entity to escape the entanglement of material existence. In the human form of life, one can conquer the enemy lust by cultivation of Krishna consciousness under able guidance.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Prabhu. Okay, who wants to read the next one? Okay, Hari Bol, I can read. आवृतं ज्ञानमेतेन ज्ञानिनो नित्यवैरिणा कामरूपेण कौन्तेय दुष्पुरेणान् दुष्पुरेणानलेन च Avritam covered, Jnanam pure consciousness, etena by this. This means a snail in Finnish language. Jnanina of the knower, Nityavairina, eternal enemy. Kamarupena in the form of lust, Kaunteya, or son of Kunti. Dushpurena, Dushpurena, never to be satisfied. Analena, by the fire, Cha also, translation. Thus, a man's pure consciousness is covered by his eternal enemy in the form of lust, which is never satisfied and which burns like fire. Purport. It is said in the Manusmriti that lust cannot be satisfied by any amount of sense enjoyment, just as fire is never extinguished by a constant supply of fuel. In the material world, the center of all activities is sex, and thus this material world is called Maitunya Agara, or the shackles of sex life. In the ordinary prison house, criminals are kept within bars. Similarly, the criminals who are disobedient to the laws of the Lord are shackled by sex life. Advancement of material civilization on the basis of sense gratification means increasing the duration of the material existence of a living entity. Therefore, this lust is a symbol of ignorance by which the living entity is kept within the material world. While one enjoys sense gratification, it may be that there is some feeling of happiness, but actually that so-called feeling of happiness is the ultimate enemy of the sense enjoyer. Hare Krishna. Okay, who wants to read next one?
Indriyani manobuddhir asya dishtanam uchyate eterimo ayati esha jnanam avritya dehina. Indriyani, the senses, manaha, the mind, buddhihi, the intelligence, asya, of the lust, adhishtanam, sitting place, uchyate, called, etaihi, by all these, vimo ayati, bewilders, yeshaha, of this, jnanam, knowledge, avritya, covering, dehina, the embodied. Translation: the senses, the mind, and the intelligence are the sitting places of this lust, which varies the real knowledge of the living entity and bewilders him. Purport: the enemy has captured different strategic positions in the body of the conditioned soul, and therefore Lord Krishna is giving hints of those places so that one who wants to conquer the enemy may know where he can be found. Mind is the center of all the activities of the senses, and thus the mind is the reservoir of all ideas of sense gratification. And as a result, the mind and the senses become the repositories of lust. Next, the intelligence department becomes the capital of such lustful propensities. Intelligence is the immediate next door neighbor of the spirit soul. Lastly, intelligence influences the spirit soul to acquire the false ego and identify itself with matter and thus with the mind and senses. The spirit soul becomes addicted to enjoying the material senses and mistakes this as true happiness. This false identification of the spirit soul is very nicely explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Yasyatma buddhi Pune Vitridatuke Sadi Kalat Adisho Bauma Ityadihi Yatirtha Buddhi Shalitena Kar Ichi Gnaneshu Abhijeshu Saeva Gokaraha. A human being who identifies this body made of three elements with his self, who considers the byproducts of the body to be his kinsmen, who considers the land of birth as worshipable and would goes to the place of pilgrimage simply to take bath rather than meet men of transcendental knowledge, is therefore is to be considered as an ass or cow.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Prabhu. Okay, who wants the next one?
Can I read the next one, Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu. Haribo.
Okay. Text 41. Tasmat tvam indriyaanyadau niyamya bharatarshava papmanam prajahiyenam jnana vijnana nashanam. Tasmat, therefore, tvam, you, indriyani, senses, adau, in the beginning, niyamya, by regulating, bharatarshava, O chief amongst the descendants of Bharat, papmanam, the great symbol of sin, prajahi, curb, hi, certainly, enam, this, jnana, knowledge, vijnana, scientific knowledge of the pure soul, nashanam, destroyer. Translation, therefore, O Arjun, best of the Bharatas, in the very beginning, curbed this great symbol of sin, lust, by regulating the senses and slay this destroyer of knowledge and self-realization. Purport. So the Lord advised Arjun to regulate the senses from the very beginning so that he could curb the greatest sinful enemy, lust, which destroys the urge for self-realization and specifically knowledge of the self. Jnanam refers to knowledge that the spirit soul is not, or refers to knowledge of self as distinguished from non-self, or in other words, knowledge that the pure spirit soul is not the body. Vijnanam refers to specific knowledge of the spirit soul and knowledge of one's constitutional position and his relationship to the Supreme Soul. It is explained thus in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Jnanam paramaguhyam me yad vijnana samanvitam sarahasyam talangam cha grihana gaditam maya. The knowledge of the self and the Supreme Self is very confidential and mysterious, being veiled by Maya. But such knowledge and specific realization can be understood if it is explained by the Lord Himself. So Bhagavad Gita gives us that knowledge, specifically knowledge of the self. The living entities are parts and parcels of the Lord, and therefore they are simply meant to serve the Lord. This consciousness is called Krishna consciousness. So, from the very beginning of life, one has to learn this Krishna consciousness, and thereby one may become fully Krishna conscious and act accordingly. Lust is only the perverted reflection of the love of God, which is natural for every living entity. But if one is educated in Krishna consciousness from the very beginning, that natural love of God cannot deteriorate into lust. So when love of God deteriorates into lust, it is very difficult to return to the normal condition. Nonetheless, Krishna consciousness is so powerful that even a late beginner can become a lover of God by following the regulative principles of devotional service. So, from any stage of life or from the time of understanding its urgency, one can begin regulating the senses in Krishna consciousness, devotional service of the Lord, and turn the lust into love of Godhead, the highest perfectional stage of human life.
Haribo. Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Or who wants to read next?
Hare Krishna. Text 42. Indriyani parani ahu indriyebhya param mana manasastu para buddhir yo buddhe paradastu sa. Indriyani, senses, Parani, superior. Ahu is said, Indriyebhya, more than the senses, Param, superior, Mana, the mind, Manasa, more than the mind, Tu, also, Para, superior, Buddhi, intelligence, Ya, one which, Buddhe, more than the intelligence, Parata, superior, Tu, but Sa, he, translation. The working senses are superior to dull matter. Mind is higher than the senses. Intelligence is still higher than the mind. And he, the soul, is even higher than the intelligence. Purport. The senses are different outlets for the activities of lust. Lust is reserved within the body, but it is given when through the senses. Therefore, the senses are superior to the body as a whole. These outlets are not in use when there is superior consciousness or Krishna consciousness. In Krishna consciousness, the soul makes direct connection with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, the bodily functions, as described here, ultimately end in the Supreme Soul. Bodily actions means the functions of the senses, and stopping the senses means stopping all bodily actions. But since the mind is active, then even though the body may be silent and at rest, the mind will act as it does during dreaming. But above the mind, there is the determination of the intelligence, and above the intelligence is the soul proper. If, therefore, the soul is directly engaged with the Supreme, naturally all other subordinates, namely the intelligence, mind, and the senses, will be automatically engaged. In the Katha Upanishad, there is a passage in which it is said that the objects of sense gratification are superior to the senses, and mind is superior to the sense objects. If, therefore, the mind is directly engaged in the service of the Lord constantly, then there is no chance of the senses becoming engaged in other ways. This mental attitude has already been explained. If the mind is engaged in the transcendental service of the Lord, there is no chance of it being engaged in the lower propensities. In the Katha Upanishad, the soul has been described as Mahan, the great. Therefore, the soul is above all, namely the sense objects, the senses, the mind, and the intelligence. Therefore, directly understanding the constitutional position of the soul is the solution of the whole problem. With intelligence, one has to seek out the constitutional position of the soul and then engage the mind, always in Krishna consciousness. That solves the whole problem. A neophyte spiritualist is generally advised to keep aloof from the objects of senses. One has to strengthen the mind by use of intelligence. If by intelligence one engages one's mind in Krishna consciousness by complete surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then automatically the mind becomes stronger, and even though the senses are very strong, like serpents, they will be no more effective than serpents with broken fangs. But even though the soul is the master of intelligence and mind, and the senses also, still, unless it is strengthened by association with Krishna in Krishna consciousness, there is every chance of falling down due to the agitated mind. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu. Okay, who's next one?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Please accept my apology for worship.
Krishna Dandat Pranam Jai Shri Prabhu.
एवं बुद्धे परम बुद्धवा संस्थाप्यतं मानम् आत्मना जहि तरुं महाभावो कामरूपं दुरसदम् एवं those buddhi of intelligence param superior buddhava so meaning samstabhavya by studying atmanama the mind atmanama by liberated intelligence jahi conquer Satrum, the intelligent, the enemy, Mahabhava, Almighty, armed one, Kama, Rupam, the form of lust, Durasadam, formidable. Translation: those knowing oneself to be transcendental to material senses, mind and intelligence, one should control the lower self by the higher self, and those by spiritual strength conquer this instable enemy known as lust. Purport: the third chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is conclusively continuously directive to Krishna consciousness by knowing oneself as the eternal servitor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead without considering one's impersonal voidness as the ultimate end in the material existence of life. One is certainly influenced by propensities for lust and desire for dominating the resources of material nature. Desire for overloading and sense gratification are the greatest enemies of the conditioned source, but by the strength of Krishna consciousness, one can control the mind, material senses, the mind and the intelligence. One may not give up work and prescribed duties all of a sudden, but by gradually developing Krishna consciousness, one can be situated in a transcendental position without being influenced by the material senses and the mind by steady intelligence directed towards one's pure uh, identity. This is the sum total of this chapter in the immature immature stage of material existence, philosophical speculations, and artificial attempts to control the senses by the so-called practice of yogi. Postures can never help a man toward spiritual life. He must be trained in Krishna consciousness by higher intelligence. Those end the book. Bhaktivedanta purports to the third chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita in the matter of Karma Yoga or the discharge of one's prescribed duty in Krishna consciousness. Haribol.
Haribol.
Can I read the book? Can I read the book?
Hare Krishna, yes, Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu. Chapter 4. Transcendental knowledge. Text 1. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Imam Vivashvate Yogam Proktavan Aham Abhyayam Vivashvanam Praha Manore Isvave Navet. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, Imam, this Vivashvate, unto the Sun God, Yogam, the science of one's relationship to the Supreme, Proktavam, instructed, Aham, I, Abhyam, impossible, Vivashvan, the Sun God name, Mamave, unto the Father of mankind, the name Vivashvan, Saha, told, Manaha, the Father of mankind, Vivashvate, Ishvakave, unto King Ishvaku, Avravet, said. Translation. The blessed Lord said, I instructed this impossible science of yoga to sun god Vivashwan, and Vivashwan instructed to Manu, the father of mankind, and Manu in turn instructed it to Ikshvaku. Purport. Herein we find the history of Bhagavad Gita says from a remote time it was delivered to a royal order, the kings of all planets. The science is specially meant for the protection of the inhabitants, and therefore the royal order should understand it in order to be able to rule the citizens and protect them from the material bondage to lust. Human life is meant for cultivation of spiritual knowledge in certain relationship with the Supreme Personality of God. And the executive heads of all states and all planets are obliged to impart this lesson to the citizen by education, culture, and devotion. In other words, the executive heads of all states are intended to spread the science of Krishna consciousness so that the people may take advantage of great science and pursue the successful path utilizing the opportunity of the human form of life. In this medium, the sun god is known as Vivashwan, the king of suns, which is the origin of all planets within the solar system. In the Brahma Samhita it said, Yat Chakshurya Isa Savita Shakala Grahayam Raja Samatha Sura Mutir Asesa Tejaha Yasa Jnanaha Brahmati Sambrata Kala Chakro Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. Let me worship Lord Brahma. Let me worship Lord Brahma said, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Govinda, Krishna, who is the original person under whose direction, whose order, the sun, which is the king of all planets, is assuming immense power and heat. The sun represents the sky of the Lord and travels its orbit in obedience to its order. The sun is the king of the planets, and the sun god, at present, of the name Hivashwan, rules the sun planet, which is controlling all other planets by supplying heat and light. He is rotating under the order of Krishna, and Lord Krishna originally made Vivashwan his first disciple to understand the science of Bhagavad Gita. The Gita is not therefore a speculative treatise
For the insignificant abundance of all the abundant standard book of knowledge coming from down time immeasurable. In the Mahabharata Santi Parva 348.51 to 52, we can trace out the history of Gita as follows. Treta Yoga tu chata to bhimashvanam manavedado manoschaloka bharti atham shutaye shutayikshva kave tado ikshvaku cha kathito bhastya lokan avishtikah. In the beginning of the Treta Yuga millennium, the science of relationship with the Supreme Personality of God was delivered by Bhishman to Manu, Manu being the father of mankind, gave it to his son Maharaj Ishwaku, the king of this earth and the forefather of the Raghu dynasty in which Lord Ramachandra appeared. Therefore, Bhagavad Gita existed in the human society from the time of Maharaj Ishwaku. At the present moment, we have just passed through the 5,000 years old Kali Yuga, which lasts 4,32,000 years. Before this, there was a Dapur Yuga, 8 lakh years, and before that, there was a Treta Yuga, 12 lakh years. Thus, some select, this number 2005,000 years ago, Manu spoke the Bhagavad Gita to his disciple and son Ishwaku, Maharaj Ishwaku, the king of this planet Earth. The age of the current Manu is calculated to last some 305,300,000 years, of which 120,400,000 have passed. Accepting that before the birth of Manu, the Gita was spoken by the Lord to his disciples, the sun god Vivaswan. A rough estimate is that the Gita was spoken at least 120,400,000 years ago, and in human society it has been extended for 2 million years. It was re-spoken by the Lord again to Arjuna about 5,000 years ago. This is the rough estimate of the history of Gita. According to the Gita itself and according to the version of the speaker, Krishna, it was spoken to sun god Vivaswan because he was a Kshatriya and is the father of all Kshatriyas who are descendants of the sun god, or the Surya Vamsha Kshatriyas, because Bhagavad Gita is as good as the Vedas, being spoken by the Supreme Person of Godhead. This knowledge is apurusha, superhuman. He is a very great instructional without human interpretation. The Gita must therefore be accepted without a mundane interpretation. The mundane wonders may speculate on the Bhagavad Gita in their own ways, but it is not Bhagavad Gita as it is. Therefore, Bhagavad Gita has to be accepted as it is, from the dyspeptic succession. And it is described herein the Lord spoke to the sun god, and sun god spoke to his son Manu, and Manu spoke to son Ikshvaku. Thank you, Guru. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu. Evam parampara praptam imam rajarisho vidu sa kalena mahata yogonasta parantapa. Evam thus parampara, disciplic succession, praptam received, imam this science, rajarshayaha, the saintly kings, with who understood, saha that knowledge, kalena in the course of time, iha in this world, mahata by great yoga, the science of one's relationship with the Supreme, nashtaha scattered, parantapa Arjuna, subduer of the enemies. Translation. This supreme science was thus received through the chain of disciplic succession, and the saintly kings understood it in that way. But in course of time, the succession was broken, and therefore the science as it is appears to be lost. Purport. It is clearly stated that the Gita was especially meant for the saintly kings because they were to execute its purpose in ruling over the citizens. Certainly, Bhagavad Gita was never meant for the demonic persons who would dissipate its value for no one's benefit and would devise all types of interpretations according to the personal whims. As soon as the original purpose was scattered by the motives of the unscrupulous commentators, there arose the need to re-establish the disciplic succession. 5,000 years ago, it was detected by the Lord himself that the disciplic succession was broken, and therefore he declared that the purpose of the Gita appeared to be lost. So like over 5,000 years ago, like 6,000, 10,000 years ago, there were some unscrupulous commentators already then. The first fake Gitas was published then, I think. 5,000 years ago, it was detected by the Lord himself that the disciplic succession was broken, and therefore he declared that the purpose of the Gita appeared to be lost. In the same way, At the present moment also, there are so many editions of the Gita, especially in English, but almost all of them are not according to authorized disciplic succession. There are innumerable interpretations rendered by different mundane scholars, but almost all of them do not accept the Supreme Person of Godhead, Krishna, although they make a good business on the words of Sri Krishna. The spirit is demonic, because demons do not believe in God but simply enjoy the property of the Supreme. Since there is a great need of an edition of the Gita in English, as it is received by the Parampara disciplic succession system, an attempt is made herewith to fulfill this great want. Bhagavad Gita, accepted as it is a great boon to humanity. But if it's accepted as a treatise of philosophical speculations, it is simply waste of time. Ribol. Okay, let's read one more. Who wants to read the last verse?
Hare Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. स एवायं मया तेभ्य योगः प्रोक्तः पुरातनः भक्तोऽसि मे सखा चेति रहस्यं ये तदुत्तमम्. Saha, the same ancient. Eva, certainly. Ayam, this. Maya, by me. Te, unto you. Adya, today. Yoga, the science of yoga. Proktaha, spoken. Puratanaha, very old. Bhaktaha, devotee. Asi, you are. Me, my. Sakha, friend. Cha, also. Iti, therefore. Rahasyam, mystery. Hi, certainly. Etat, this. Uttamam, transcendental. Translation. That very ancient science of the relationship with the Supreme is today told by me to you because you are my devotee as well as my friend. Therefore, you can understand the transcendental mystery of this science. Purport. There are two classes of men, namely the devotee and the demon. The Lord selected Arjun as the recipient of this great science owing to his becoming the devotee of the Lord. But for the demon, it is not possible to understand this great mysterious science. There are a number of editions of this great book of knowledge, and some of them have commentaries by the devotees, and some of them have commentaries by the demons. Commentation by the devotees is real, whereas that of the demons is useless. Arjun accepts Shri Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and any commentary on the Gita following in the footsteps of Arjun is real devotional service to the cause of this great science. The demonic, however, concoct something about Krishna and mislead the public and general readers from the path of Krishna's instructions. One should try to follow the disciplic succession from Arjun and thus be benefited. Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna. Prabhu, you can read one more.
Okay. Text 4. Arjuna uvacha aparam bhavato janma param janma vivasvatah katham etad vijaniyam tvam adau proktavaniti. Arjuna uvacha, Arjuna said, aparam, junior, bhavatah, your, janma, birth, param, superior, janma, birth, vivasvatah, of the sun god, katham, how, etat, this, vijaniyam, shall I understand, tvam, you, adau, in the beginning, proktavan, instructed, iti, thus. Arjun said, the sun god Vivaswan is senior by birth to you. How am I to understand that in the beginning you instructed this science to him? Purport. Arjun is an accepted devotee of the Lord. So how could he not believe in Krishna's words? The fact is that Arjun is not inquiring for himself, but for those who do not believe in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or for the demons who do not like the idea that Krishna should be accepted as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For them only Arjun inquires on this point, as if he were himself not aware of the personality of Godhead or Krishna. As it will be evident from the 10th chapter, Arjun knew perfectly well that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the fountainhead of everything and the last word in transcendence. Of course, Krishna also appeared as the son of Devaki on this earth. How Krishna remained the same Supreme Personality of Godhead, the eternal, original person, is very difficult to understand for an ordinary man. Very difficult for an ordinary man to understand. Therefore, to clarify this point, Arjun put this question before Krishna so that he himself could speak authoritatively. That Krishna is the supreme authority is accepted by the whole world, not only at present, but from time immemorial, and the demons alone reject him. Anyway, since Krishna is the authority accepted by all, Arjun put this question before him in order that Krishna would describe himself without being depicted by the demons who always try to distort him in a way understandable to the demons and their followers. It is necessary that everyone, for his own interest, know the signs of Krishna. Therefore, when Krishna himself speaks about himself, it is auspicious for all the worlds. To the demons, such explanations by Krishna himself may appear to be strange because the demons always study Krishna from their own standpoint, but those who are devotees heartily welcome the statements of Krishna when they are spoken by Krishna himself. The devotees will always worship such authoritative statements of Krishna because they are always eager to know more and more about him. The atheists who consider Krishna an ordinary man may in this way come to know that Krishna is superhuman, that he is Satchidananda Vigraha, the eternal form of bliss and knowledge, that he is transcendental and that he is above the domination of the modes of material nature and above the influence of time and space. A devotee of Krishna's like Arjun is undoubtedly above any misunderstanding of the transcendental position of Krishna. Arjun's putting this question before the Lord is simply an attempt by the devotee to defy the atheistic attitude of the persons who consider Krishna to be an ordinary human being subject to the modes of material nature.
Ribo. Yes, this is a very nice purport.
Yeah. So here it actually means that Arjun was not actually in illusion. He's inquiring for future generations, for
Yes,
those
Prabhu.
who are mudhas like me.
Yes, he asks like all the persons in the YouTube comments, they always ask, how can Krishna be? It's similar questions. So now I understand better.
Yeah, actually, I've seen so many comments on so many people that how can Krishna take birth? Because they're impersonalists.
Yeah.
They don't believe God can have a form. But I say to them that there's a difference between actually taking birth and appearing. Because if Krishna comes in his own spiritual body, how can he take birth? He doesn't accept a material body like us. He comes directly. He descends within the womb of Devaki. He's
Yes.
transferred from the mind and heart of Vasudev to the heart of Devaki. So
Yes,
like
Prabhu.
that,
Yes, Prabhu.
transcendental.
In this purport, it was said that they always this the demons always study Krishna from their own standpoint, and because they see themselves that, oh, I took a bird, so of course God must also be like me.
Yes, they think from their own perspective, like the frog in the well,
Yes, Prabhu.
Yeah,
Haribol, now let's go to six Astakam pairs.
we will.
चेतोदर्पणमार्जनं भवमहादावाग्निर्वापनं श्रेयः कैरवचन्द्रिकावितरणम् इत्यावादुजीवनम् आनन्दं बुद्धिवर्धनं प्रतिपदं पूर्णामृतस्वादनं सर्वात्मा स्नपनं परं विजयते श्रीकृष्णसङ्कीर्तनम्
नाम्नामकारे बहुधा निजसर्वशक्तिः स्तत्रार्पिता नियमितस्मरणेन कालः एतादृशी तव कृपा भवन्नमापि दुर्दैव मे दृश्यमिहाजनेनानुरागः
तृणोरपि सुनिचेन तरोरपि सहिष्णुना प्रमादेन मात्येन कीर्तनेन सदा हरि
Natanam.
Natanam. You go on, Prabhu.
Prabhu.
नदनं न जनं न सुन्दरीं कवितां वा जगदीश कामे मम जन्मनि जन्मनीश्वरे भवदा भक्तिरहेतुकी त्वयि
Ajinandatanu chakinkaram patitam mam vishame pavam putau kripaya tava pada pankaja stita duli satsam vijintaya.
Nayanam galadashrudharaya, vadanam gadgadarudaya gira, pulakarnichitam vapu, kada tavanam grahane bhavishyati.
युगायितं निमेषेण चक्षुषा प्रावृषायितं शून्यायितं जगत्सर्वं गोविन्दविरहेण मे
अस्लिस्य वा पादार्थं सृष्टु मां दर्शनं मर्माहतं करो वा यथा तथा वा विदौ दम्पतो मत्प्रणलथस्तु सा एव नप्रः.
Haribo, glory to the Sri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life of repeated birth and death. The Sankirtan movement is the prime benediction for humanity at large because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and it enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we are always anxious.
O my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings. And those you have hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names, you have invested all your transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rule for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by your holy name. But I am so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them.
One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking himself lower than the straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all senses of false prestige, and should be ready to offer our respects to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly.
O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotional service, birth after birth.
O son of Maharaj Ananda, Krishna, I am your eternal servitor, yet somehow or other I have fallen into the ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet.
O my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up and when will the hairs of my body stand on end at the recitation of your name?
O Govinda, feeling your separations, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I am feeling all vacant in the world in your absence.
I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and he shall remain so even if he handles me roughly by his embrace or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worshipful Lord, unconditionally.
हरि बोल श्री शिक्षाष्टकम की जाय हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जाय पंचतत्व की जाय नित्यानंद प्रभु की जाय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य
Jai Jai
जय जगत
Jai
गुरु भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी श्री प्रभुद की जाय
Srila Prabhupada ki
जय
jai.
गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि
Hari
हरि
Hari
Hari
Bol.
Hari Hari Bol.